Good morning and welcome back to Diving Deep into Battletech here on Gaming with ADHD. I am joined tonight by, whatever direction I have to point here, which isn't even coming up on screen, whatever. I am joined tonight by Skaz, who has graciously agreed to co-host with me. We thought he was going to send his daughter tonight, but apparently she thought the pool party was a little bit more exciting. So
she's 10. She can read, but probably not this.
She does have a little bit more charisma, though. Let's be honest.
I mean, that'll give it.
Than both of us combined.
Probably.
Anyways, how you been, man?
I've been okay. I mean, today's been an interesting day, but nonetheless, it's been all right. Other than that, got to leave work a little bit early to deal with stuff, but here we are. So let's go.
Left work early, so you got fired again.
No, I told my boss that I had an emergency and I had to leave, and she said, "Okay, go. Thank you."
Oh, come on! It was a little funny.
I'm just saying.
No, that's good though. I managed to get more than 4 hours of sleep, so
That's new,
right? And of course, we do have Hungar, providing us some incentive to maybe show up on time next week. We'll see, Hungar. Don't plan on it, but we'll try.
I mean, yeah.
In Skaz's defense, he does have like a 1 hour commute, one direction.
It's 1 hour in the mornings because there's no traffic. It's an hour and a half at night.
Okay, I was averaging.
You were averaging. I'll take that.
Anyways, so all right. So last week we covered combat in Battletech, but obviously there's a giant, after effect, in regards to that, where today we are going to be talking about damage and heat. Now, depending, we may also cover the next section, which is kind of small. I just didn't want to, overcommit ourselves, which I may have been known to do in previous deep dives. Or no, not last week. Last week it was like okay, maybe it'll take us a couple weeks, but let's try to get through it. No, we had when I was doing the Eberron deep dive, we had some that were just like, it's like, why is this section not over yet? It's only been 8 weeks, right. And I am absolutely bound and determined to not do that this time around. So, even though we've had a few hiccups, staying on schedule, that's fine. So, all right. Before we get started, folks, do make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with all of your friends if you think it will be helpful. We do try to put out a few videos each week here on Gaming with ADHD, whether it's board games, role-playing, miniatures, or anything in between, and we'd love for you to come along and see what we have to share. So, with that all out of the way, what do you say we get this party started, Chris?
Let's go.
All right. So, damage. Obviously one of the more important parts of the game, because you can't blow up giant stompy robots without beating them up.
I mean, that's kind of the ethos of what attacking does.
I mean, it's kind of a big deal. Let's see. Bear with me for just a second. I realize, it would probably be helpful if we had a record sheet to actually show how that works. Lame. You can only share one camera at a time. Okay, so we'll have to we'll figure that out as we need to go. So let's just minimize that for now. All right. Damage. This chapter explains how to apply damage to battle mechs and deal with a variety of special effects that can occur as a result of it. Every weapon does a specific amount of damage defined as damage value, which appears under the damage value column on the weapons and equipment table on page 55, as well as the record sheet. Follow the step-by-step procedure outlined in damage resolution below to determine the effects of damage. Attacks. It is very important to remember that all attacks in a phase must be declared and made before any of the hit locations and damage from those attacks is resolved. Rather than attacking with and resolving damage for one weapon or one mech at a time, damage resolution comes after all attacks by all mechs in a given phase. So, I was starting to think that maybe we do it a little different in our games, but no, that's like we roll all of our attacks, figure out what hit, and then roll all of the damage. So, never mind. That's how it works. All right. Damage from any source is first applied to the armor of the location damaged. If the location is one of the 3 torso locations, the appropriate facing is damaged. Keep in mind, there is front and rear armor on the torso, not on the arms, legs, or head. Once the armor of a location facing is gone, any further damage to there is dealt to the internal structure of that location. Each time a location has its internal structure damaged, a critical hit in that location is possible. Once the internal structure of a location reaches 0, that location is destroyed, along with everything inside it. After a location is destroyed, further damage that would have been applied to that location transfers inwards to its neighboring location. See transferring damage on page 34. All right, and one other thing that I will point out with this is once a location is destroyed, not only, and I know it'll say it at some point, but not only is the everything in that particular location destroyed, everything beyond that location. So as damage transfers in, the removal of weapons and equipment transfers out. So, because like if you take out a torso, well, the arm is also gone. So, you don't get to use those either. All right. Resolution order. The order in which damage is applied is important. If resolving multiple hits on a single mech, be sure that everyone is aware what order the hits are being resolved. The attacker chooses the order in which they determine hit locations and resolve damage for each of their mech's successful attacks. From turn to turn, the attacker can change this order. It is also important to understand that when applying damage, every single hit is completely resolved, but the damage dealt and any critical hits inflicted before moving on to the next hit. This includes single attacks that result in multiple hits, such as cluster weapons. For example, if an SRM-2 strikes a mech and both missiles from that attack hit, then the hit location and damage from the first missile is resolved. The attacker determines whether any critical hits occur, resolves each hit that occurs separately, and only then does play move on to resolve the second missile from that attack. There is a very important distinction between resolving damage and applying its gameplay effects. Damage dealt by attacks made in the weapon attack or physical attack phases, including critical hit effects, is resolved as it happens. However, damage dealt by attacks never affects any other attack made in the same phase. All attacks declared in a phase get to be made. This is true even if a mech is destroyed before the time comes to resolve damage from the attacks it declared and hit with earlier that phase. In other words, attack damage is recorded as hits are resolved, but it does not affect the target until all attacks declared that phase have been resolved. Displacement and falls, unlike attacks, the gameplay effects of damage from displacement and falls are applied immediately rather than at the end of the phase. Okay, that I think is interesting.
Well, I mean, you don't take a PSR until after all damage is done. So it's talking about something, I would assume it's talking about something like a charge, or you fell over trying to do something or something like that.
Right.
But it's not from damage like this. Damage has to actually happen before you can have effects from it, like I just said in the paragraph above.
Right. I just think it's interesting that one goes immediately. But I mean, but yeah, you're right. It's like, they've already done damage, they've done the physical attack, whatever it is, and all of that is resolved, and then they're making that piloting roll. So technically you're quote unquote at the end of the phase anyways.
Right. Yeah, it's the only time I think it's talking about things where you're falling or being displaced outside of the attack phase, because this is talking about damage. It's not talking about the attack phase. So if I fall because I slid on a road and fell over, you don't wait till the end of the movement phase to take the damage. You take that damage right then. It's only talking about it's distinguishing between attack damage and other types of damage.
That, that's a good point. All right, I will write it into my brain that way. I like that. All right. Piloting skill.
We do it that way already. We never wait to take fall damage at the end of the piloting phase. You fell over, you take your damage right then and there.
But remember, there is a difference between we've just been playing it this way for years and actually reading the rule and having it spelled out, and then, having to make those logical connections. That's where I'm at.
You said it, not me.
No, I fully admit it. I just, again, it's like I said, just putting those pieces together. So, all right, piloting skill rolls. The gameplay effects of damage are always applied before any piloting skill rolls resulting from that damage. For example, if a foot actuator is destroyed in the weapon attack phase, this forces a PSR. The standard +1 modifier for losing a foot actuator is applied to that PSR, as well as to any other PSRs called out or called for that phase and the rest of the game. All right. Tell us about critical hits.
Critical hits. If a location takes one or more points of internal structure damage but is not outright destroyed, the attacker checks for critical damage by rolling 2d6 and consulting the determining critical hits table. On an 8 or higher, the target mech takes critical damage. The higher the roll, the greater the damage. Consult the mech's critical hit table to determine the effects. If the location is destroyed rather than just damaged, no check for critical hits in that location is made unless it contains one or more explosive slots. In that case, any resulting critical hits that strike explosive slots in that location are resolved as normal. Hits that do not are always discarded. So just to clarify with that, it's saying that if in the shooting, if I'm shooting at Brian's mech and I've blown off his left torso, we don't need to keep shooting at it unless one of those shots goes and hits an ammo bin. If it hits an ammo bin, you need to apply the ammo bin hits, because that's going to explode and further damage his mech, which is why that's important. Anything else doesn't really matter because it's not going to affect his mech in any way. It's just going to fall off, be unusable, etc.
Right. But also another thing to point out is that the, dealing with exploding ammo only comes into play if you get a critical hit that damages that. So, because like if you're hitting, armor or weapons or whatever, as you're destroying that particular location, but you never hit the ammo is just going to fall on the ground. So just because you blow up a location doesn't mean you get that ammo explosion.
Correct. And that's why it talks about up in the section above that Brian just read, talking about you always do all the hits, because things like this can happen. You can totally obliterate a mech by blowing up that ammo bin. You have the chances to try that, which is why you always process all the other attacks.
Right. Well, and again, it gets back to, this is all supposed to be simultaneous. So
Right.
if you've declared your attacks, go through all your attacks, then go through and do all your damage, and even if and then if you happen to get that ammo explosion and none of your other attacks matter, doesn't matter. You already shot them. So,
Right.
Okay.
The effects of critical hits, such as piloting skill roll modifiers, are cumulative unless specifically stated otherwise, and last for the remainder of the game. Certain critical hits may force a PSR. If a critical hit also applies a modifier to this PSR, that modifier is in addition to any other modifiers unless stated otherwise. Multiple location. If a single hit damages the internal structure of multiple locations, critical damage is resolved for each of those locations.
How would a single hit damage the internal structure of multiple locations?
Well, you would be hit by those, leg-mounted rear-facing lasers, of course.
They're the worst.
In reality, I think it's because the fact that you have, if you have an AC-20 hit that hits an arm and that damage bleeds over because it destroys the arm.
And you've already
you've already damaged you've already gotten to internal structure on the torso that it bleeds into.
That's true, because if you're so like say you've already blown off the armor, or the bleed damage does go over, and then takes out the armor and hits the internal structure. Yes, okay, that would make sense. Because then also, even though you've obliterated the arm, it's still, you still get that critical hit. So when the ammo blows up, you get to do that as well. So, okay, makes sense. All right. And here is our critical hits table. So
this is where it's talking about have to roll an 8 or higher. So effectively the way this works is when you shoot somebody, so I shoot somebody with a Gauss rifle, I breach the armor by blowing off all the possible armor points, and some of the damage from my Gauss rifle hit go internal, you automatically take a critical hit roll, which is rolling 2d6. If you roll an 8 or higher, then you get one or more critical hit locations as shown on the chart.
Right.
Through armor critical hit. A roll of a 2 on hit location table provides a chance for a critical hit even if the attack did not damage internal structure, though the attack must still have dealt at least 1 point of damage. This is known as a through armor critical hit. The chance for attack hit is in addition to the normal check for critical hits resulting from damage to the internal structure, and applies even if a mech has no armor left in that location. For example, a hit location result of 2 against a mech with no torso armor left requires 2 rolls on the determining critical hits table, 1 for the attack hit and 1 for damaging the internal structure. If attack hit is scored on an already destroyed left or right torso, the chance for attack transfers to the center torso along with the damage.
Yeah, easy way to think about that is if you roll a 2 when figuring out your hit location, you get a bonus critical.
Bonus critical chance, yes, and it's going to determine which facing you're in as to which torso can be affected by that. So if you're shooting somebody and they're front facing, it'll be the 2 automatic hits their center torso. But if they're facing to the left, then your 2 is going to be hitting the left torso because the chance to hit their center torso modifies with the way you're facing. So that's why it's saying it can hit a different type of torso. It can hit the side torsos, not just the center torso. Generally, it'll hit the center torso though.
Yeah, I actually just like the idea of just calling it a bonus crit chance. Just because, yes, even if you hit the internal, then you do damage to that as well, right. or then you get that critical as well. So
applying critical hits. When critical damage occurs, the attacker rolls for each critical hit to determine which slot in the damage location the hit affects. The target player marks off this damage on their mech's critical hit table. It is possible that some locations can be blown off completely, even if they still have internal structure remaining. The exact procedure depends on the location damaged. Head or leg hits. If the critical hit strikes the mech's head or legs, roll 1d6, find the result on the critical hit table, and mark off the damage. If the slot roll is an inapplicable slot, roll the die again. If all slots in the location are inapplicable, then consult transferring criticals. See right. So what it's talking about here, show the chart. Effectively,
well, it's not a chart; it's just another section. So that's what I was checking for.
No, the chart is the upper right hand corner.
Oh,
it's a picture, but it's a picture.
My bad.
Not a chart.
All right.
There we go. So what's talking about here is if you hit somebody in the arm and you roll a 1d6 to see which you do, upper or lower, then you are going to hit that option that comes there. So if I shot the arm, run d6 to see if I hit the upper bracket or the lower bracket. If I hit the lower bracket, then I roll again 1d6 to see what I hit. On a 1 or 2, I would hit the AC 5, which would be damaged, so it would no longer work. If I hit 3, it hits the ammo section, which would blow up in a spectacular ball of fire. On 4, 5, or 6, it's an inapplicable slot like it was talking about, and you would roll again.
So, and okay, let's finish applying critical hits, and then I want to, vent a little bit, but we'll get there.
All right. Torso or arm hits. The critical hit table for those locations is divided into 2 blocks of 6 slots, with the first block labeled 1 through 3 and the second block 4 through 6. When assigning a critical hit to these locations, the attacker first rolls 1d6. This identifies which block of the slots in that location takes the hit. On a roll of 1 through 3, the hit is assigned to the first block of 6 slots, while on the result of 4 to 6, the hit is assigned to the second block. The attacker then rolls another 1d6. The result of this roll identifies the specific slot in the block that takes the hit. If the slot rolled is an inapplicable slot, roll both dice again, not just the last die. If one of the blocks of 6 is filled entirely with inapplicable slots, simply ignore that block and only roll 1d6 when assigning a critical hit to that location, just if you were assigning a leg or head critical. If all slots in the location are applicable, then consult transferring criticals. Multi-slot components. Some items take up multiple slots on the critical hit table. A single critical hit disables any item or weapon or structural component except the engine, gyro, or sensors, regardless of its number of slots. Critical hits on additional slots occupied by the item have no further effect but soak up the hit. The critical is assigned to the slot, but no further effects occur. Multiple critical hits. If multiple critical hits result from a roll on the determining critical hit table, resolve each critical hit completely before moving on to the next one. Inapplicable slots. If a critical hit roll would apply damage to a slot for which any of the following applies, it is an inapplicable slot and the player rolls again. The slot has already taken a critical hit, or the slot is empty. On pre-generated record sleeves, empty slots are labeled roll again, and the word in slots that cannot take damage always appear fainter than the words in a slot filled with equipment that can and are italicized. For an inapplicable torso or arm hit, the roller rolls both dice again, not just the last die. If all slots in the location are inapplicable, then consult transferring criticals. See below.
All right. So this is something that, I don't know why, but recently I've come to the realization I sort of don't like. So let me clarify. When we've got this, where, okay, so we've got the roll again sections. Okay. There's nothing there. Okay. That's fine. I get that. Roll again on those. But there's 2 issues I have with criticals. Number one, if you hit one slot on the weapon, so here the AC 5, well then the autocannon is completely gone. Can't use it. There's probably rules in Total Warfare or not total, in tactical operations or strategic operations, where if they get hit, then you get the +2 to gunnery or to your 2 hit roll or something.
Yeah.
I think that would be a little bit more fun. I would like to try that, but and then do something like the engine and the gyros where it's so say weapons can take 2 hits because you hit quote unquote non-critical portions of the weapon or something. Anyway, theory. Now it doesn't necessarily apply here, but I am going to bring it up just because it's in my brain for this little vent session. ferrofibrous armor and endosteel skeleton.
Yeah.
So those all occupy critical slots. But if I'm not mistaken, those also count as roll again slots, correct?
Correct. If you look at modern record sheets, most of them are labeled ferrofib / roll again, and they are grayed out like it talked about in the text. So you know to roll again on those. It is not something that takes away your critical hit by blowing up an armor section or armor filler section, I guess.
See, I think those should also get to take critical hits.
Why? What gameplay? My ask would be, what gameplay mechanic would you do if they did hit it?
Okay, so what's the reason for putting them in the critical slots?
To prevent you from being able to take more weapons on a light mech.
No, it's because at least the in-game
or
rule,
a bigger engine even. I don't know.
well, no, but the in-game rule is that ferrofibrous armor and endosteel structure are bulkier. They take up more room. Yes, they weigh less, but they're bigger.
Right.
Okay, so why not? It's like, okay, yes, the critical hit this ferrofibrous armor chunk, but yeah, it's that larger piece of it's that bulkier piece of armor because of what it is, anyways.
Think back to mech construction rules. Pre-built mechs, like I play clan mechs, Clan Wolf, as we talked about before. So they have a pretty predetermined set of slots that you could put a weapon into, that sort of thing.
Right.
If you're doing mech construction rules, you could technically do something that's a 30-ton mech, whatever, give it a big engine, give it a bunch of ferrofib and endosteel, and then shove medium lasers into it all day because you get that big weight savings by going endosteel and ferrofib. So it really limits your ability to abuse the mech construction systems like that. Whereas if you didn't, then you might be able to do some crazier builds than it allows you to.
I don't know. I'm just saying, I mean, that's the whole point to those pieces of equipment, anyways. The whole point to endosteel structure is, okay, yes, you can't fit as numerically as many weapons in, but weight wise, you can fit a lot more weapons in. And but again, you have that trade-off. It's occupying critical slots.
Right.
So I'm not saying it should count every single time, but if you hit ferrofibrous or if you hit endosteel, I think those crits should count. It's okay, yes, you went internal, but you hit this bulky armor piece that was just kind of wedged in there because the stuff's a pain to work with.
I mean, I'm a clanner. I'd love that rule because go for it. But I think it would imbalance the game a lot.
All right. Well, luckily, it's our own tables. We can try things like this.
I'm down.
All right.
Transferring criticals. If a critical hit cannot be applied to a location, it might transfer to another location. This applies in the situation at the time of the hit. If all possible slots in the damaged location suffered critical hits in previous phases or turns, or otherwise inapplicable slots, the critical hit transfers to the next location per the damage transfer diagram. Critical hits to the center, torso, and head never transfer. If all possible slots in the damaged location were not hit in previous phases, any excess critical hits do not transfer or are lost. Destroyed location. Critical hits that occur when a location is destroyed never transfer. So effectively what it's talking about here is that if you've already blown off everything in the arm, it's not going to cheat you out of a critical hit. You now just critical hit something in the torso that's with the arm. However, if you hit somebody in the head, you can't possibly have all inapplicable locations in the head because that means the pilot's dead and the mech is gone, effectively. And the same thing with the center torso. You've blown up the engine of the gyro, or both the engine of the gyro at that point, and the mech is dead and non-functional. So those two can't transfer because there's always a valid target to hit there until you hit the magic jackpot on which one you hit.
Right. And this would go against the points I was literally just making. Because I was thinking about it. It's okay, so really this is only going to apply for light mechs that might have one or two weapons in the arm, but you've got 12 critical slots.
Right.
And a locust. A locust, I think has a shoulder actuator and that's it. Shoulder actuator and a couple of machine guns.
Right.
Yeah. You got 8 extra critical slots there. So
you'd never hit anything important.
Right. So there are cases, but that would also be really hard. You'd have to do so little, like doing that little damage, because you've got to do damage in order to get a critical. Anyway, so maybe it'll be like heavier light mechs or medium mechs or something, but something along those lines that can take a hit or two. But anyways, all right, just thinking. All right. Critical hit effects. Critical hit types are arranged alphabetically by item. The location of the item on the mech, head, leg, torso, arm, is noted in parentheses in this section. If a critical hit destroys a slot carrying ammunition, the ammo explodes. The mech warrior takes 2 points of damage or wounds as a result of the feedback received through their neuro helmet. In addition, the mech takes damage to its internal structure. Like, okay, that I'm just going to be a little extra whiny, feedback received through their neuro helmet. You're in a mech with ammo that just blew up. I highly doubt you're just taking neuro feedback. You're getting tossed around that cockpit. Even if you got your straps on. Just say it. All right. A critical hit to an ammo slot only explodes the ammo in that slot. The explosion deals damage equal to the ammo's damage value times the shots remaining. So this goes back to last week where we were talking about how there's LRM 20 ammo and LRM 5 ammo. Even though it's literally the exact same stuff, it has to count differently because we're counting it based on shots.
Friends don't let friends play with machine guns.
Friends don't let friends play with machine guns. So, all right. He
hasn't got to his therapist. He's coming up to it. He reads slow.
Okay, number 1, case does not exist in a game of armored combat. Yes, I realize I already brought up endosteel structure and ferrofibrous armor, but for the purposes of these rules, no case right here. As far as slot, I think because remember, ammo, so when you're setting off the chain reaction by blowing up the ammunition, you could have 4 tons of ammo in a location, and each one takes up a critical slot. But technically, the only one that is being set off is, the one in the critical slot that you hit.
Right. You don't blow up all the ammo bins in that one location when you hit it. You blow up the one bin that you hit, and all that damage takes out the internal structure and then transfers through the internal structure diagram to every other part of the mech. So that bin of machine gun ammo I was telling you never to play with, you set off 400 points of damage in your left or in your arm even. The 380 points of damage that didn't get soaked up by the arm go to the right torso. And then the 360 points of damage that gets sucked up by the right torso go to the center torso, and then your medic explodes and dies. So you only hit the one slot on the critical roll because you only blow up the one ammo bin, but all that damage flows through the mech and just trashes your mech.
Yeah, if you get an ammo hit, trust me, you're just trying to be that guy to, oh, I blew up one ammo bin. Let's blow up all of the others. I did 8,000 points of damage. Just get on with the game. Right. They're probably dead.
they're almost always dead.
Okay, so where were we? Missile ammo explodes with a force equal to the number of missiles remaining times their damage value. For example, 1 ton of machine gun ammo explodes with a force of 400 points of damage, while 1 ton of SRM-2 ammo explodes with a force of 200 points of damage. Calculate the total damage value of all ammo currently carried in the slot and apply that total to the internal structure diagram. Let's see, which usually destroys any mech. Because an ammo explosion damages the internal structure of the location where it explodes, a roll to determine critical hits is necessary. Empty bins. If an empty ammunition slot takes a critical hit, the hit is still applied there, but no further damage or effects occur.
Right. So that daisy chain that Brian was talking about before can still happen on those other critical hits that go into the other sections. But again, when you've got 200 points of damage that doesn't hit your armor, it just goes internal. Your mech is just going to die, and it really doesn't matter. Maybe if you hit an ammo box that's got like, one shot of AC-20 ammo left in it, and you hit that and the 20 points of damage flow, that's when you want to make sure you check those other tests. But if the bin is reasonably full, the mech is going to die, period.
Right. So again, like it says, roll to determine critical hits as necessary. Just again, if it's not dead, play through. You'll figure it out. It's not that hard.
Right.
All right. Arm blown off. This critical hit occurs when the player rolls 12 on the determining critical hits table for an arm hit and is automatic. Neither player may choose to roll the 3 critical hits instead. The hit blows the arm off. When an arm is blown off in this way, ammunition in that arm does not explode. Though the limb is destroyed, none of the armor or structure on the limb is lost. This is relevant when calculating whether the mech will be required to make a piloting skill roll. An arm blown off by a critical hit remains in the hex in which it was lost and may be used as a club. Okay, so this makes more sense. I don't think we've ever actually blown an arm off.
Yes, we have. Not by rolling not by rolling boxcars.
Right. That's what I mean. Like, yes, we have destroyed many a limb on a battle mech. But anyways, the reason I was bringing this up because we were talking about like picking up a tree or picking up a battle mech limb or whatever. And I'm like, if I blow it off, if I destroy the thing, why am I good? No, this now makes more sense. Okay.
Yeah.
If you take the thing off, then put a marker down that there's a limb there that can be picked up. All right. Cockpit. A critical hit to the cockpit destroys that slot, kills the mech warrior, and destroys the mech. Remove the mech from the map in the end of the phase in which it was destroyed.
You did.
Yes. You can destroy a mech without with a headshot without doing 12 points of damage. So
you did.
All right. Engine. Mech engines have 3 points of shielding. Each critical hit to an engine slot destroys 1 point of shielding. As shielding is destroyed, the amount of heat escaping from the mech's fusion drive increases. The first hit increases the mech's heat buildup by 5 points per turn. The second adds another 5 points of heat buildup per turn for a total of 10 points that turn. A mech is destroyed if it suffers 3 engine hits. Remember to count engine slots present in the mech's side torsos, if any. Which, okay, I do think this is kind of funny that, we've been avoiding, quote unquote clan invasion type rules. But then here they're like, oh yeah, if there's any, engine slots in the side or in the side torsos.
I think they had extra light engines before clan invasion. I think the industry did have some, but the clans do it better. So
they had a little bit, but it would have technically been outside of the basic rules because it wasn't until the 2750 tech readout where you got some of the old Star League era mechs and you had the inefficient, the crappy endo steel and the crappy, ferrofibrous armor.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just wanted to point that out that it's like, well, okay, this technically doesn't apply. And then they're like, yeah, here's this one. All right. Foot actuator. This critical hit destroys the muscle in the foot. For each foot actuator damaged, reduce the mech's walking movement points by 1. Recalculate its running movement points accordingly by multiplying the new walking movement points by 1.5, rounding up. For you take +1 for each piloting skill roll. Because of it, the mech's controller must make a PSR at the end of the phase in which the critical hit occurred. Additionally, a PSR is required whenever the mech jumps. The roll is made at the end of the mech's movement. and +1 to all kick attacks. All right, tell us about gyros.
Gyro. The gyroscope keeps the mech upright and able to move. The first hit to a gyro damages it, and the second destroys it. When a mech's gyro is destroyed, the mech automatically falls and can't stand up again. The usual piloting skill roll made to avoid damaging the mech wearing the fall applies a +6 target modifier for the destroyed gyro. Mechs with a destroyed gyro may make weapon attacks per firing while prone and may change facing by 1 hex side per turn, provided they have at least 1 MP available. A mech with a destroyed gyro is not considered immobile. PSR modifiers. If +3 if damaged for all subsequent PSRs, +3 if destroyed cumulative. The mech's controller must make a PSR at the end of the phase in which the first critical hit occurred, unless the mech received a second gyro hit in the same phase, in which case it falls automatically, so it's unnecessary. A damaged gyro forces a PSR every time the mech runs or jumps made at the end of the mech's movements. Now, this is relatively different than how we play. Older sets of rules where if your gyro is dead, you're dead. But technically, you do get to still live and lay on the ground and shoot 1 weapon off your arms if you have any.
Yeah, that is not how we played the game at all.
No, it's not. That's our house rule. That's one of our house rules, yes.
Yeah, if you take two life support, 2 engine, or 3 engine, or 2 gyro, yeah, you're done.
Life support only if we've declared the planet to be a toxic place, which we don't always bother to do. So that's not necessarily death.
That's true. Just open the window.
Right. I mean, you get hit if you roll the magic number on the headshot, kill the cockpit, it's dead. If you hit the engine 3 times, it's dead. You hit the gyro twice. But you have to remember that hitting the gyro twice requires you to have multiple critical hits in the center torso. And realistically, when you're firing weaponry like what we're talking about, you're likely just to blow the center torso up before you get multiple critical hits that blow up a gyro. It can happen, of course, but more often than not, you just core the mech by blowing the center torso up, and so it really doesn't interplay.
Right. Still fun, though.
It is fun. Hand actuator. A critical hit to the hand actuator destroys the muscles controlling the mech's wrist and hand. The mech can no longer make physical weapon or clubbing attacks with that arm. Target modifier +1 to all punches made with that arm. Missing actuator. Some mechs are designed without one or both hand actuator. The target modifier number for punch attacks given above still applies to such mechs, i.e. whether the actuator is destroyed or absent is irrelevant. Head blown off. Head blows off a mech's head when the player rolls a 12 on the determining critical hits table for the head hit location. This destroys the mech. Again, cockpit dead, you're dead. Easy as that. Heat sinks. A critical hit to a heat sink destroys it and reduces the mech's ability to dissipate heat. For example, if a mech with 16 heat sinks has 3 of its heat sinks destroyed, it can now only dissipate 13 points of heat per turn. Hip leg. A critical hit to a mech's hip freezes the affected leg in a strict position. The mech's walking MP is cut in half. Recalculate its running MP accordingly by modifying the new walking MP by 1.5 rounding up.
Hold on a second. Going back to my, here, Brian wants to house rule everything theme of today's episode. Heat sinks. Bringing in additional equipment that doesn't exist in a game of Armored Combat. For double heat sinks. Okay. What about, reducing the heat dissipation by 1? So if it's a double heat sink, if it's a clan double heat sink, it's got 2 critical slots. So hit 1, it only dissipates 1 hit or 1 heat. Hit 2 takes it out completely. Inner sphere, where it takes 3 slots. Again, same 1, 2 dead, but you still have a 3rd slot on there.
I'm all in favor of making my clan mechs better.
No, but I mean, okay, outside of this advantages Chris, am I out of line? Or
it would make heat sinks different from every other item in the game, because if you hit an AC5 that takes up 4 slots once, it's dead. You'd be making a house rule for heat sink specifically, which is taking away from everything else.
Remember, I already made that house rule for weapons. where they get 2 hits like a gyro or
you're making everything more survivable, which I think it comes down to balance. If you think about it, it's already hard enough to blow up a mech when it comes to all the target modifiers, the roll to hit, the location you're hitting, the amount of hits you're doing, if you get a critical or not. It can take a lot to blow up a mech, and if you're not getting real tangible damage out of it, I think people would get frustrated with that. Plus, it's harder to track.
That's fair. Okay, so I'm gonna say this then. For quote unquote large engagements, which let's be honest, Battletech, a large engagement is 4 mechs per side. But like I actually think it could be kind of good for for like a Solaris 7 kind of situation. You know, if you're doing like mech dueling, you know, so everybody only has 1 mech. Okay, cool. Make the mechs a little bit more survivable, you know, and track these things. I think it could actually be a bit more dramatic to do stuff like that.
I think if you do a Solaris 7 scenario, you could absolutely say, I mean, it's real easy to think about, you know, they customize their mech to give themselves a little extra, you know, armor in places or whatever. I think that sort of limited engagement would be fine for those type of rules, but you get into a larger engagement, you're just going to get frustrated and lose track of stuff.
That's fair. All right. For the record, folks, we are in the process of planning our next Battletech game. So, you know, this is giving me ideas for what to throw together as a scenario. And then I'm just going to point it out. You know, for a fact, if I put that out there, Ben would be losing his mind with excitement. All right, let's get back to it.
After a hit critical hit, ignore any other critical hit modifiers from previous turns on that leg. This means it is possible for a mech's performance to improve after a hit critical hit if it had suffered earlier critical hits to the same leg. Locked in a straight position, the leg serves as sort of a crutch, making movement easier in some cases than moving on a number of free flexing yet damaged actuators. A critical hit to the second hit reduces the mech's MP to 0, but the mech is not considered immobile. PSR modifiers, +2 per hit critical hit. This modifier overrides all other critical hit modifiers from that leg. The mech's controller must make a PSR at the end of the phase in which the critical hit occurred. Additionally, a PSR is required every time the mech runs or jumps. The roll is made at the end of the mech's movement. Don't get shot in the hip, folks.
Or do. If you've already taken your lower leg or foot actuator, you know, take the hip. It might be a little better for you.
Yeah, because we always remember that rule too.
Dude, usually the mechs are dead before we're taking out leg actuators.
That's what I'm saying. Jump jet. For each critical hit to a jump jet, reduce the mech's jumping MP by 1. Leg blown off. This critical hit occurs when the player rolls a 12 in the determining critical hits table for a leg location kit and is automatic. The player cannot choose to roll the 3 critical hits instead. When a leg is blown off this way, ammunition in that leg does not explode, although rear-facing lasers do stop working at that point. Though the limb is destroyed, none of the armor or structure on the limb is lost. This is relevant in calculating whether the mech will be required to make a PSR. A leg blown off by a critical hit is left in the hex and may be used as a club.
Hold on just a second. All right. Life support. Any critical hit knocks out this system permanently and leaves the pilot vulnerable to increased heat. The other critical slot can still take damage, but the hit has no additional effect. The mech warrior takes 1 point of damage at the end of every heat phase. The mech's heat scale is between 15 and 25. If the heat scale is 26 or higher, the mech warrior takes 2 points of damage instead. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so you can take a life support hit, and as long as you keep your heat down, which, let's be honest, at that point is going to be harder, you might do okay. Hold on just a second. I've got Hit Reese. Okay. A life support critical hit also eliminates the mech's internal air supply. If the mech is submerged, aka depth 2 or deeper water, or prone in depth 1 or deeper water in the end phase of any turn, the pilot takes 1 point of damage. Lower arm actuator. This critical hit destroys the actuator in the mech's lower arm. Damage from punches with this arm is halved. Target number modifiers +1 to all weapons firing from that arm, +2 to any punches or physical weapon attacks with that arm, +2 to all clubbing attacks. Designed with missing actuators. Some mechs are designed without one or both lower arm actuators. Such mechs do not suffer the weapon attack modifier for the missing actuators, though the target number and damage modifiers to physical attacks still apply. So it's still harder to punch with your rifleman, even though it's not harder to shoot. Lower leg actuator. This critical hit destroys the muscle actuator in the lower leg. For each lower leg actuator critical hit, reduce the mech's walking MP by 1. Recalculate its running MP accordingly by multiplying the new walking MP by 1.5, rounding up. Additionally, for each lower leg actuator critical hit, all kick attacks inflict half the standard damage. Yeah, see, actually, this is actually not bad. Yeah, again, if you lose the hip, so your foot, your lower leg actuator, you're losing movement points, all of those penalties are gone. So, yeah, take your hip hit after you've taken a foot or lower leg actuator hit. +1 piloting skill roll modifier each. The mech's controller must make a PSR at the end of the phase in which the critical hit occurred. Additionally, a PSR is required every time the mech jumps. The roll is made at the end of the mech's movement. And +2 to all kick attacks. Sensors. Critical hits to a mech's sensors make weapon attacks increasingly difficult. Critical hits to sensors do not affect physical attacks. +2 to all weapon attacks after the first hit. A second sensor hit makes it impossible for the mech to fire its weapons. In both cases, physical attacks are unaffected. Okay. I don't think I've ever had to deal with sensors being blown up. You're muted. You're muted.
Let me get multiple critical hits in a head that doesn't hit the pilot, that doesn't also blow off the head.
I don't disagree with you.
It's a little bit of an edge case.
Yeah. Yeah. You're literally talking about like 2 LRM single missile hits. Because yeah, you could take 1 machine gun hit, maybe like micro lasers, but we're getting like way into the weeds of the things that can pull it off.
You're digging for this one, man. I mean, you take so much damage to the head to do this sort of thing, and you're dead. You only get at most 12 points of damage in a head. 9 of it armor, 3 internal.
Right. The key here is the internal structure. There's only 3 points.
Right.
So the only way you could get multiple, critical hits on a head is by doing 2 1-point attacks. And I'm literally just trying to think of.
Think of it this way. I hit you with an AC 10 in the head. I do 1 point of damage internal. On the 2d6 roll for number of hits, I do 2 critical hits.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, we were dumb. We completely forgot the roll for number of critical hits.
I would say you were dumb. I knew what I was talking about. You did
Look,
not.
It's a royal we. You're here with me. You're dumb by default.
Hey.
Come on, let's get through the rest of these. Let's see. All right. Shoulder. A critical hit to this actuator freezes the shoulder joint. The mech may not punch or make physical weapon attacks with that arm, nor may it make clubbing attacks. You then suffer +4 to all weapons firing from that arm, and you have +2 to pushing attacks. Upper arm actuator. This critical hit destroys the actuator in the mech's upper arm. Damage from punches with the arm is halved. +1 to all weapons firing. +2 to all punches and physical weapon attacks with that arm. +2 to all clubbing attacks. Upper leg actuator. This critical hit destroys the muscle in the upper leg. For each upper leg actuator damage, reduce the mech's walking movement point by 1. Recalculate its running movement point accordingly by multiplying the new walking movement point by 1.5, rounding up. Additionally, all kick attacks inflict half the standard damage. Piloting skill roll modifiers +1 each. The mech's controller must make a piloting skill roll at the end of the phase in which the critical hit occurred. Additionally, a PSR is required every time the mech jumps. Blah, blah, blah. All right. Yeah, we've already read that like 8 times.
Right.
All right. Tell us about weapons and equipment.
Weapons and equipment. When a weapon or piece of equipment receives a critical hit, it is rendered useless for the remainder of the game. If the item takes up more than 1 critical slot, its remaining slots are not also marked off. Each one can still be hit by subsequent critical hits. This has no effect other than to absorb the critical hit. For example, a PPC fills 3 critical slots. The PPC is disabled as soon as one of the 3 critical slots takes a hit, leaving its remaining 2 slots able to take critical hits, but otherwise resulting in a useless weapon. Destroyed locations. If a location is destroyed, all components of that location are also destroyed, including all armor, which counts towards the 20+ damage for forcing a PSR. In addition, the destruction of the head, leg, or torso locations has further effects detailed below. Critical hits. If a location is destroyed by the elimination of internal structure and it contains 1 or more ammo slots, the mech's controller must still check for critical hits in that location. Limb clubs. You blow an arm or a leg off, it becomes a club. Got it. Head destruction. If a head has all its internal structure destroyed, the mech warrior inside is killed and the mech is destroyed. Remove the mech from the map at the end of the phase in which it's destroyed, i.e., you're dead.
But it's great for salvage.
It's very good for salvage. If you're playing salvage rules, yes.
Just put a new head on that thing.
I will comment though for this that being shot in the head and having your head blown off is one of the most frustrating outcomes of the game. Think about it. You've planned to go play Battletech. You've ramped up for 3 or 4 days. You've built your force up, and the first time somebody shoots you with a Gauss rifle, they get lucky and hit you in the head, and your mech pilot is dead on the first shot.
Correction.
It's really frustrating.
Correction. Second time he was shot at, and it was an ERPPC.
I'm just using it as an example. I wasn't calling out Eric. I'm just saying that when it happens, it sucks.
I'm not calling out Eric. I'm just merely informing what happened. It was on
sure
turn
he loves
2.
That reminder.
And then also on turn 3 with his second mech.
2 in a row.
Did I ever tell you that he ran into my son at Costco? And who this is my son that I just don't get along with very well, you know, and he had to tell him that I keep talking about this because it's never going to happen again in my life. And I don't care that he's right. I still did it. Sorry.
Leg destruction. When a standing mech loses a leg, the mech automatically falls and ends its movement for that turn. Apply a +5 modifier to all piloting skill rolls. This replaces all other PSR modifiers generated by damage to that leg. If the mech stays prone, it can still change its facing 1 hex side per turn. It's considered to have walked if it changes its facing. A prone mech with 1 leg may attempt to stand on its remaining leg in subsequent turns. However, it may make only 1 attempt per turn, and this attempt to stand is always considered running. In an exception to the normal rules, only 1 PSR is required for this attempt, even if damage or other factors mean that the attempt would normally require 2 or more PSRs, though all modifiers from such factors still apply. If the mech manages to stand, it has a walking MP of 1. This overrides all MP increases and cannot run. Overheating can reduce that walking MP to 0. The mech may still jump, but the piloting must make a piloting skill roll with a +5 modifier each time the mech lands. A mech that loses both of its legs automatically falls, if not already prone. While not considered immobile, the mech has 0 MP available. It cannot change hex sides or attempt to stand, although it can pop itself up to fire if it has both arms. Although one leg mech can no longer run, the one exception is that it can still use the minimum movement rule and can therefore try to stand even though it doesn't have the 2 MP required, which always counts as running. See page 11. We also don't play by this rule. You blow up both your legs, you're dead.
That's generally true. But yeah, no, I was going to point that out that, this is a good point about that minimum movement rule that, even if you're still reduced to 0, or even if you're reduced to 0 walking, you can always get that 1 hex of movement.
Right.
Which in this case, you have to have at least 1 leg, which, why not drag yourself with your arms if you have fully functional arms? Just saying.
Torso destruction. The next right or left torso is all its internal structure destroyed. The corresponding arm is blown off immediately. Additional damage dealt in that same phase that would have struck that arm or torso automatically transfers to the center torso. If the center torso is destroyed, the entire mech is destroyed. Remove the mech from the map at the end of the phase in which it was destroyed. If the center torso is destroyed by an ammo explosion, the mech warrior is killed as well. You dead. That's all I got.
All right.
Oh no, we're going to second cam.
No. I just wanted to. I wanted to look at something, but I obviously have the PDF on screen, so
you do.
I can't look at a different section of the book.
Transferring damage. Once a location has been destroyed, all further damage to that location transfers to the next location inward. This occurs both when there is leftover damage from the attack that destroyed the location, and when damage occurs from hits that later strike the destroyed location. The damage is first applied to the armor the location transferred to, unless it came from an ammo explosion. So, if I shoot you in the arm with a Gauss rifle, I blow the arm off through blowing up all its internal structure. The rest of the damage goes to the armor, not internal, because it's acting like it hit both slots effectively at the same time.
Right. Ammo explosion, it's already internal, so it's going to transfer internal.
Right.
But that AC-20 shot is already external, so it's going to stay external.
Easiest way to think about it.
Man, and I literally just made that up.
How's it going? Damage to a missing arm or leg transfers the torso on the same side. Additional damage to destroyed side torso location transfers to the center torso. Damage from a destroyed head or center torso does not transfer because you're dead. The damage transfer diagram illustrates this principle, and the diagrams below explore it in more detail. Damage dealt to the rear hit zone, that transfers inward, transfers to the appropriate rear torso phasing. So, for example, damage from the rear that hits a missing left leg is transferred to the left rear torso. So that deals with facing, not necessarily being shot. There's no rear leg armor. Unlike rear leg firing lasers, there's no rear leg armor.
I was about to say it.
I'm not gonna let that one slide. So the point is that just check the facing and apply it as normal. Destroying a mech. A mech is considered destroyed and out of the game if any of the mech following occur. Its mech warrior dies, or if 6 mech warrior wounds are taken. Okay, again, if a mech warrior takes 6 wounds, you've done something exceedingly rare because you only get so many points of damage to the head. You can have an ammo explosion, you can fall, you can do things like that. But at some point, the mech warrior is probably just going to fall asleep and not wake up because you can take so much damage to them. I have not seen 6 mech warrior wounds ever in a game. Its engine is destroyed, caused by it suffering 3 engine hits or destruction of its center torso location. Destroyed mechs are removed from the map at the end of the phase in which they're destroyed and have no further effect in the game. A mech warrior dies if the head or the head's cockpit slot is destroyed, or if the mech's center torso is destroyed by an ammo explosion.
Which the main key there is if you're doing any kind of a campaign and, dealing with, mech warrior progression, things like that, you have to keep track of, did your pilot survive or not?
Right.
So, all right, step-by-step damage. The following offers a thorough walkthrough of damage resolution. It assumes that you're familiar with the rest of the chapter, which if you've been paying attention as we've gone along, you should be. All right. To apply damage, begin with the amount of damage inflicted and its hit location. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do this. Let's stop that screen. We're going to present a new screen. Actually, no, hold on. Yeah, folks. Super professional here. All right. Chris, open that up in like a new window and then share it.
Did you email something to me?
Private chat. Private chat.
Oh, private chat.
Because I'm going to have you control the taking the damage, while I read off the step by step. Now, folks, if you would like to follow along, I'll go ahead. Actually, I'll just go ahead and I'll put that in the regular chat. So, all right, so you can see what we are doing. Probably want to zoom in on that a little bit.
Probably do. I was thinking to myself that you should zoom in on that before forgetting that I'm the one who's controlling it. So
yeah. All right. So, step by step. To apply damage, begin with the amount of damage inflicted and its hit location, and start at step 1. Answer each question yes or no and follow the instructions. If a head, leg, or torso location is destroyed, see the separate sections for each of these events for additional information. All right, let's do that. Are you pre-applying some damage?
I am.
All right, that sounds great.
So in this case, we've blown off the damage. We've damaged the armor on the leg. The remaining damage has gone internal down here.
Okay.
If we continue to apply damage to this, Flex does this a little differently, but I will show you this way. If you do something where you apply this damage, 12, it shows up as it's dead, and then it shows you that the damage should transfer up to the torso up here.
Yeah. All right. Well, don't take him too far out.
And I just get excited.
That's fair. Okay. So I'm going to shoot at you with my Marauder, and I hit with 1 PPC, the autocannon 5, and a medium laser. We'll see how well this this actually works. All right, damage transfer. Remember that there is no damage transfer from the head or center torso locations. If a step below would call for transferring damage from one of these 2 locations inward, the attack is finished instead, and the remaining damage is lost because the mech is destroyed. All right, so I should get a couple of D6. All right, so we've already determined that I've already hit with these weapons. There we go. I have 2d6. So I'm going to roll to see where my PPC hits. So 10 points of damage to location number 9. Which it's just a straight front shot. So location number 9 is the left leg, which is no longer there. So does the location have facing or armor? No. Go to step 2. Is there damage remaining? No. Wait.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Check off 1 internal structure on the internal structure damage. Until all damage is applied or internal structure in the location is destroyed, go to step 3. Does any internal structure remain in the location? No. At the start of this phase, did the location have any components that could take a critical hit? No. Is there ammunition at the location? No. Is there damage remaining? Yes. The remaining damage transfers to the next location inward, so our torso. If transferring to a torso location, the damage is applied to the front armor unless the attack came from the rear, in which case it is applied to the rear armor. So, give yourself 10 points of damage to the left torso. Yeah, one other thing, folks. This is like the sheets are a little different. While it looks like you are looking right on at the mech, if you'll notice, it is actually labeled such that the torso on the left side of the page is the left torso, even though technically it would be the right torso. All right, so let's take another 5 points of damage to... All right, I'm not doing location 9 again because we already did that. Location number 8, which is
left torso.
The left torso. So put 5 more points of damage there. Uh-oh, we've gone internal. So do we get to do any criticals? 6, so no. All right, 5 more points of damage to hit location 10, which is the left arm. Obviously, there's no damage remaining, so 5 more points to hit location 6, which is the right torso. So, ta-da! We've done damage. We've taken off some armor. I do not have any critical hits, and
I don't have a left leg.
And he doesn't have a left leg. But he didn't have a left leg before we started, so here we are. All right. So it's really simple, to just follow along. Let's see. Actually, I can bring this back in.
Would you like me to stop sharing now? There we go.
I was to say no. I've got it. All right. So, and as you can see, they walk through all of the steps on page 36. All right.
You'll have to look at that chart like once or twice, and then you'll understand. It's really intuitive once you just get the mechanics down. It's not complex.
Right. It literally is just one of those things where, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So
there are things in Battletech that you have to think about and try and remember and check on a regular basis. Damage transfer is not one.
All right. Tell us about heat, Chris.
Heat buildup is battle mech's greatest limiting factor. Though a mech dissipates heat through its heat sinks, heat builds up when it moves or fires its weapons. And a high rate of activity can produce more heat than a mech can dissipate. A warrior who pushes their mech past its limits eventually must pay the price. The more heat points a mech builds up, the greater its heat. A player tracks their mech's heat points using the column of boxes on the mech record sheet labeled heat scale. The heat scale records heat levels from 0 to 30 heat points. The overflow box is used to track heat levels above 30. The heat point table indicates the number of heat points generated by various actions and damage. It also shows the number of heat points a mech can dissipate its heat sinks by standing in a water hex. As the mech's heat reaches various levels on the heat scale, the mech suffers the adverse effects listed for those levels. Building up heat. Various activities build up heat at different rates. They can be broadly broken down into 3 categories: movement, weapons and equipment, and other. Movement. Walking generates 1 heat point no matter how many MP the mech expends or how many hexes it moves. Running. Running generates 2 heat points no matter how many MP the mech expends or how many hexes it moves. Jumping. Jump jets generate 1 heat per jumping MP expended, minimum 3. For example, when a mech jumps 1, 2, or 3 hexes, it generates 3 hit points. If it jumps 4, it generates 4. So on and so forth. Standing up. Each tipped stand creates 1 heat point in addition to the heat generated by the movement mode the mech is using that turn. Weapons and equipment heat. Most weapons generate heat points when used. These sources are too many to summarize here. The weapons and equipment table on page 55 lists the heat an item generates, also found on the record sheets. Other heat. Engine critical hits. The first engine heat to a mech generates 5 points of heat. The second hit raises this to 10. This is not applied if the mech is shut down. Dissipating heat. Heat sinks are the primary way in which a mech rids itself of heat. Each heat sink dissipates 1 heat point per turn. Submerged heat sinks dissipate twice as much heat. A mech standing in depth 1 water has its leg-mounted heat sink submerged. A mech standing in depth 2 or deeper water or prone in depth 1 or deeper water has all its heat sinks submerged. No more than 6 additional heat points per turn can be dissipated due to water.
No more than 6?
Yes.
Huh.
I can't go prone in water and double my 16 single hit heat sinks. 32.
Oh. Yeah, and no, because I mean, if you had clan double heat sinks in the legs, because you've got 2 critical slots. Okay. So those normally dissipate 4. Oh, you just dissipate an additional
Maximum of additional 6.
Right?
I can't go prone in water and double my heats, all my heat sink power.
No, you know what this is? Because that's the thing. It's like even with clan double heat sinks, the most additional you could dissipate is 4. Okay. But
remember,
they said
though,
no.
If it's saying if you're standing in depth 2 or deeper water, your entire mech is submerged. So even your engine hits.
Oh, right.
So when the next time you decide to go prone in water, you get 6 heat point benefits. That's it, though.
Interest. I don't think I like that. But fun fact: if you have a tripod mech with heat sinks in its legs, you can still dissipate 6.
Gosh.
No, that those are real things.
Tripod mechs are not really real things. They're quads with a leg blown off.
No. They're real things. Okay. You don't know what I'm talking about, do you?
I don't.
Oh my gosh. That's because you didn't do Dark Age.
Correct. I did not do Dark Age.
No, it's not that. Ares? Hold on a second. Yeah. All right. Now I gotta remove that. Oh God. So share screen. Share. Ares Omnimech is a super heavy class tripod Omnimech, which was first produced by the Republic of the Sphere, produced in secret as part of the Republic's Rhodes project. The Ares was based on development of the Poseidon super heavy tripod. The mech was conceived as an Omnimech, so I think this is the one. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. So notice 1, 2, 3 legs, tripods. They actually have the Ares was so large it had a crew of 3, a mech warrior as pilot, a gunner, and a technician to repair it and keep it operational. 2 clan ERPPCs, 3 clan Streak 6, and in addition to 2 ER medium lasers, 3 ER small lasers, 2 LRM 5s, 3 SRM 2s, and 6 anti-personnel pods.
This is a 135-ton tripod mech, which we know that you can't have a mech bigger than 100 tons, so this doesn't exist.
I mean, this is Sarna. This is legitimate.
This is also 3135 and well past anything that's covered in the topic we're talking about. Tripods don't exist in the text we're reading.
Look, we have already talked about plenty of Like, see, they made figures for it. Look at that. That's actually kind of cool.
A little bit.
Okay. Anyways. All right. I had to.
You had to squirrel for a second.
I did. I will be honest. I want some of those.
You're gonna go
Like
and break out a tripod the next time you invite Ben over with his quads and
Wait a
make fun of him having an extra leg, aren't you?
Wait a second. Look at this. Look at I just noticed something. Look what he's got.
Reverse knees.
Reverse, but also
Like
tell me those aren't leg mounted lasers.
But they're not rear mounted leg lasers.
There though, like, okay, rotate this guy 180 degrees. This leg back here, there's a rear mounted leg laser.
But it's still located in the front.
It's the front of the leg, but the leg is facing backwards. Whatever.
My gosh.
You
know what? You know what? After something has jumped the shark and they just start throwing all sorts of crazy, silly stuff out there, that's what this is.
And I'm here for it.
Seeing as how you're a Guardianosphere, why don't you read about recording heat buildup, since I don't ever generate that much heat?
All right, recording heat buildup. During each turn's heat phase, each player adds up the heat points built up by their mech. They then subtract the heat dissipated by heat sinks. The result may be positive or negative. Add this number to the current level of heat shown on the heat scale. If the result is negative, adjust the heat scale downward. If the result is positive, adjust it upward. The heat scale cannot drop below 0. Mark any heat generated beyond 30 in the overflow box on the record sheet, which will still need to be dissipated in future turns. Keep in mind, folks, when you hit 30 heat, you shut down. Okay. And in that case, you are immobile. So they're going to get +4 to hit, or minus 4 to hit. Whatever. They're going to take you out if you shut down. So keep that in mind. Right. Don't shut down. And you can't even restart until you're below 30 heat. So if you go into overflow, you've got to dissipate all of that before you can even attempt to start up. So
yeah, if you get to that level of heat, you got all sorts of problems.
I would say if you get to that level of heat, you're probably dead anyways.
Or you better make sure that the other guy is.
Well, and also don't forget, by the time you've hit 30 heat, you've had to check for ammo explosions. You've taken damage to the mech warrior. There's like, if you manage to overflow your heat, well done. I'm going to give it to you. All right. Effects of heat. Excessive heat can injure a mech warrior. It also causes a mech to function less efficiently. The mech moves more slowly, fires less accurately, and may shut down or even explode. Some of these effects are permanent, others disappear as the mechs cool. Heat timing. The mech suffers heat effects after players have adjusted the heat level for the turn, as described above in recording heat buildup. So keep in mind, you've made your attacks, you've done your damage, then you're applying your heat. Okay? So all of these effects are after you've already resolved all of that. All right, movement. At 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 heat points, subtract the number indicated from the mech's walking MP. For example, anywhere from 5 to 9 heat points, subtract 1 from the mech's walking MP, and then recalculate your running accordingly. This effect is not cumulative with any previous heat-caused movement point lost. For example, when a mech's heat buildup reaches 5 on the heat scale, its walking MP is reduced by 1. When the heat buildup reaches 10, reduce walking movement points by 2 total, not by 2 more. When the heat scale drops below the point at which these effects occur, the mech regains 1 walking MP, though previous applicable losses remain in force. For example, if the heat falls below 10 on the heat scale but remains at or above 5, the mech continues to suffer -1 MP until the heat drops below 5. Jumping. Reductions in walking MP from heat buildup do not affect a mech's jumping MP. Weapon attacks at 8, 13, 17, and 24 heat points add the number indicated to the mech's target number for weapon attacks. For example, at 8 heat points, add 1 to all weapon attack target numbers for as long as the heat remains at or above 8. As with movement, these effects are not cumulative and disappear when heat buildup is reduced. These penalties only apply to weapon attacks, not physical attacks. At 14, 18, 22, 26, and 30 heat point, a mech attempts to shut down its power plant automatically as a safety procedure. A conscious mech warrior can override the power plant safety shutdown procedure as indicated by the avoid target number listed with the effect, although shutdown cannot be avoided at 30 or more heat points. If their mech's heat scale is at or above 14, the player rolls 2d6 once during the heat phase. If the result is equal to or greater than the highest avoid target number corresponding to the mech's heat level, the pilot avoids shutdown for that turn. If heat accumulation reaches 2 or more trigger levels in one turn, roll 2d6 only once, avoid it against the highest avoid target number. If a mech shuts down, a piloting skill roll is immediately required. Why wouldn't you just automatically fall? The power's off.
But you still got you still got your feet planted down. You're not moving. You just stop.
I don't know. I'm just saying. Your controls aren't responding. So, let's see. A piloting skill roll is immediately required with a +3 target modifier. Additionally, the mech becomes immobile. Its equipment ceases to function except for heat sinks and life support, and it cannot attack or take any other action. Engine critical hits do not generate heat while a mech is shut down. For every turn that a mech is shut down, its heat sinks dissipate heat as normal, and the player may attempt to restart the power plant during each subsequent turn's heat phase. To do this, the player rolls 2d6. If the result is equal to or greater than the highest current avoid target number, the player can restart the power plant. A mech may move and fire in the turn following the turn in which the power plant is restarted. When the heat drops below 14 on the heat scale, the power plant restarts automatically, even if the pilot is out of action. Other players can target a shutdown mech with aimed shots. A mech's heat level must be below 30 before a restart can occur. Players may elect to voluntarily shut down a mech during any end phase. They may then restart the power plant in any subsequent end phase, provided they first pass any shutdown avoid checks due to heat. Oh. So I did want to point this out. This is a nice little colorized version of the heat chart, showing what type of an effect it has.
Keep in mind that if you scroll back up, one thing to point out is if you're up there in the 20s and 30s and all that, you're not just taking the one modifier you're on. Like say you're at 24, you've got a +4 modifier to fire. You're taking one of each other color as well. You had to avoid the ammo explosion on 23. You had to avoid the shutdown on 22. You take the -4 movement points at 20. So it's not even that you just get one of those things, it's you get all of those things, which makes it so crippling to anything else you're trying to do.
Well,
which is why heat balancing is so important.
Hold up, but to clarify, once you generate your heat, so figure out where your heat level is. Okay, so say you go up to 15. Okay, yep. So at 15, we've got a green, a yellow, and a red.
Right.
I'm going to ignore these two greens and this one red down here.
Correct.
Because I'm only worried about what's the worst thing that could happen to me of each type.
Yeah, effectively, right.
Right.
That's why I said each color. You go down one each color.
Right.
Obviously, on regular mech sheets, you don't get each color, although like Flex, like we were showing a minute ago, will highlight which ones you apply to you once you get up to that level of heat. But effectively, just go down the chart that I was talking about. You have a shutdown, you have an ammo, you have a movement, you have a modifier. And you don't get the ammo explosion up until 19. So realistically, you're only taking 1 or 2 generally, but you can get to do all 4 depending on how hot your mech gets.
Right. Like if I went to 23, so I'm going to avoid ammo explosion on 6. I'm going to avoid shutdown on 8. I'm going to lose 4 movement points, but I'm not going to take another ammo explosion and another shutdown avoidance.
But you do take the +3 modifier to fire.
Correct. Exactly. You use one of each color all the way down, until the colors repeat.
Right.
So, all right. Ammunition. If a mech with unemptied bins of ammunition reaches 19 points or higher on the heat scale, one of these bins may explode. To avoid an explosion, the mech's controller must roll 2d6 once and meet or exceed the target number of the highest ammo explosion threshold. A mech with 19 to blah, blah, blah. Okay. When an overheated mech's ammo explodes, the ammo critical slot with the most destructive ammo per shot explodes first. Ammo per shot. Okay, we already did that when we talked about ammo explosions earlier. So, okay. All right, hold on. All right. All of the appropriate ammo type in a single critical hit slot explodes. If more than one critical hit slot holds the appropriate ammo type, the one with the most shots remaining explodes. If 2 or more locations have an equal number of shots remaining, randomly determine which one explodes. Resolve the So is it just one type of ammo? Or is it all your ammo?
I think it's just one bin because they don't assume that all your ammo cooks off on one roll. I mean, maybe there's a seam or something in the bin that failed or whatever, but that's not going to happen at every ammo slot immediately. This is them just saying this is how the higher damage types are more volatile, and that's why they blow up. But everything else can also blow up because the fact that you could also get a critical hit as you blow as the mech damage
right
internally and all that.
But it says when an overheated mech's ammo explodes, the ammo critical slot with the most destructive ammo per shot explodes first.
Yeah.
Right, but then it doesn't say anything about others.
No, it's just telling you how to choose which one blows up.
Okay.
It's not saying first and then you go back and do the other ones. It's just saying that
find the worst and use that one.
Find the worst thing that can happen and use that one.
Okay. All right. There's your clarification, folks. Find the worst and roll with it. All right. Ammunition explosions automatically injure the mech warrior, inflicting 2 points of damage and forcing 2 consciousness rolls. Okay. It didn't say that in the previous one. It said you would take the 2 points of damage, but it didn't say you would force 2 consciousness rolls.
Maybe. I don't remember.
All right. I'm going to I would apply it as well. Basically you take the hit, make a consciousness roll, take a second hit, make a consciousness roll. All right. Tell us how to damage mech warriors.
Oh, now I'm looking. Now you got me going down the rabbit hole, though. So hold on. All right, damage mech warriors. If a mech's life support system takes 1 or more critical hits, its mech warrior suffers damage when the mech's heat levels are high. The mech warrior takes 1 point of damage at the end of every heat phase of the mech's heat scale is between 15 and 25. If the heat scale is 26 or higher, the mech warrior takes 2 points of damage instead.
Ta-da!
We're done.
We're done. We finished. We made it, folks.
We made it. Don't heat up.
Don't get shot in the head.
Don't have a leg get blown off.
Always look out for the rear-mounted leg lasers.
Oh.
No, that was good. It was nice to see just some, I don't want to say clarification, but just like reinforcement. Okay, this is how this works. Go through these steps. Yes, we've done it for years, but I think it actually makes a little bit more sense, even if I'm raising additional questions.
I agree. Yeah, I mean it's good to see the updated rules and talking outside of the set of rules for those of us who've been playing for a long time. The rules that when they modified the rules, they're very similar to what we've always grown up with. They just made some small slight changes for balances, which fills in nicely with the way that the rules work. So, it's good to be reminded of them all and remember which set of rules we're actually using, because sometimes that's hard to remember.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, any final thoughts before we call it good for the day?
None that are relevant to Battletech.
None that are relevant to Battletech. All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We will be back next week, and I am debating a little bit on how we're going to cover it, because we're going to cover other actions, like so domino effect, falling, piloting skill rolls, things like that. And then it gets into scenarios, and I'm not 100% sure how I want to cover scenarios.
You don't.
No, I think there's still good anyways, we'll let you know. Anyways, other actions, and we might talk about we might talk about construction.
Construction, I can see. Scenarios.
No, I think here's the thing. I think talking about scenarios is still going to be good. Number one, they actually have some decent scenarios in the basic rules. Okay. And then also like talking about like different I think it would be fun to talk about different scenarios that we've done. Talk to people about creating their own scenarios. Or should we just save that for like its own episode?
I think that should be its own episode, because then we can be more free flowing. Whereas construction and other actions are core parts of the rules. Scenarios can be whatever you want it to be. You don't have to make it anything.
That's true. Okay, you know what? Yeah. So next week, plan on other actions and construction rules, which will basically finish the Game of Armored Combat rulebook. And then we'll do a side quest episode talking about scenarios, and we'll use we'll also look at some of the scenarios out of this book as well. So, all right. Well, on that note, folks, hit the like button. Again, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for hanging out with us, everyone, and we will talk to you all next Wednesday. Thanks for coming.
Peace.